This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I'm joined by Jon Pegg over Zoom. John, firstly, how are you?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. Nice and busy. Everything's going good.
Glad to hear it. Now, let's obviously get straight into it with regards to the fighters in your gym. Before we do come on to them, obviously it's well known a lot of your fighters have teamed up with Mick Hennessy and Hennessy Sports last year. But since then, we've seen that Channel 5 have announced a deal with Wasserman Boxing. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to get kind of an update from yourself as to what that means for your guys. Obviously, Sam Eggington, Shakan Peters, Casey Benjamin, amongst others.
Basically, they're just going to have to work with Mick and find other spots to get out there. I said to the lads, they're quite lucky in the fact that they're exciting fighters who are willing to take proper fights. I think, I think Sam's never going to struggle to have someone pick him up for a date, and neither a Shaq or Casey or River Wilson Bent. But yeah, no, they're still working with Mick, and we should have an announcement in the next few days, hopefully over the weekend, about what he's got planned for them, and it's all good. But I think only Channel 5 have ever delivered the fight of the year, and then kind of released the people who brought them fight of the year on the lowest budget out of all the TV channels. I don't know. There must be more to it. That's why I do small shows, not big shows.
How much of a surprise was it to you, John, to have seen that announcement of Wasserman and Channel 5 teaming up, and how did kind of the team take it? I'm sure even though you'd have assured them everything will be okay, they might have in their own minds had a little bit of kind of worry or uncertainty as to when they'll next be able to get back out.
Do you know what? Nothing really surprises me in boxing. I'm honestly like, there's nothing that comes up and I go, oh, what a shock. Nothing. And the lads, as anyone, but you got to think that there's always uncertainty in boxing. Am I going to be on the next show? Is it the right fight? Am I going to be a mandatory? They're going to fight. That's their job. And you got to remember as well, the good thing is all my lads come through the small hall route. Every single one of them's done it the hard way. Every single one of them's won their titles in the away corner. All of them have done that. Every single one of them have took two tough fights at a stage when most people aren't taking tough fights. So they've took it in a stride. It's been a bit of a tricky one, but we're coming just after the pandemic. We've got used to kind of tough, tricky situations. If you're still getting phased now after 2 years of wearing masks and having things stuck up your nose, you're in the wrong game. You've got to just get on with it. But, hopefully the announcements in the next few days will show where they're going and what they're up to. And, yeah, not ideal, but when's boxing ever ideal? Do you know what I mean? It's, everyone who's in fights have not had it exactly how they want it. Do you know what I mean?
I know in Sam's case, I remember it's probably about a week and a half ago, I saw him put a tweet out saying that an announcement was imminent on his next move, but obviously we never saw that announcement in the end. What was the plan, or what is the plan for Sam moving forwards?
Well, Sam, basically, we just want to get him a title that's going to lead to, his ambition of a world title fight, whether it's an interim or, like one of them continentals that get you like a top 5 rank, something like that. We've got a decent opponent lined up, an unbeaten Polish guy. Well, we had him lined up for April, so hopefully we've still got him, but I think we will. Sam likes fighting unbeaten guys. He's took more unbeaten records than most active fighters. Some guys don't fight many unbeaten guys that don't want to take that risk. He's took 5 or 6 unbeaten records in his career. So we just push forward with that. It's, again, Sam's a great example because there's not many fighters who have had the adversity he's had, with like unexpected losses or bad decisions, and it doesn't faze him. So a change of dates or a different channel for it to be on, Sam would fight his next door neighbour in the back garden if people paid him to do it. Do you know what I mean? So, and like I say, we're not lucky in the fact that we all have to do it from the small hall, but in situations like this, we are lucky because we're a lot thicker skinned and we're used to adapting and we're used to having to get on with things. So it hasn't phased us as much as it would some people with TV contracts, if you know what I mean.
You're mentioning the opponent you have lined up for Sam next, were there any domestic names that were considered?
Yeah, all the domestic names get thrown at us, but we're kind of at the stage where it's like, unless they've really got something to offer and it's a good fight, Sam's had them tough fights. It's got to suit him a little bit because there's so many fights where it didn't suit him or he was in the wrong corner or nobody expected it. He's kind of earned his stripes now. Like, they talked about Eubank, but Eubank's a middleweight coming down from very successful at super middle. Sam's a super welter who's moved from welter a few years ago, and he jumped up to middle because there was an opportunity there. And I just said he's just naturally too big. Do you know what I mean? Then, they mentioned Cal Brook, and we're like, well, what? Let's be honest. Why is Cal Brook going to take that? Cal's at a stage in his career where he deserves massive paydays, massive opportunities, and he needs. Cal needs the same as I'm saying about Sam wants the motivation. He doesn't want to fight guys who are looking for their first British title. Cal doesn't want to fight guys who are looking for their first world title fight. So when people say it to us, it's not like Sam had ever refused, but we're not going to chase it because it's a little bit of disrespect to someone like Cal. He's got his sights on bigger things. And like when people ask us to fight someone who's looking for a British title fight as their biggest fight ever, Sam's kind of like, well, I've been there and done that. I might not be as up for it as I would other fights. And it would be the same way the other way around. And, we're not like big-headed enough to say, like, oh, well, you've got to do this or no, whereas we kind of look at ones and say, well, we want more out of a fight at this stage of a career. Cal's 35 and he's had such a hard and successful career. He should be allowed to pick exactly where he wants and what motivates him. The Amir Khan fight motivated him massively. And at that age, you've got to be motivated massively. So, the fights that get talked about, they sound like they're realistic, but really they're not that realistic. If you think about it, they're just not going to happen. You know what I mean?
John, when you say the fights that get talked about, in the Eubank Junior or the Cal Brook scenario, were they discussed internally as in you maybe at least reached out to the teams, or was it simply that you just saw rumors or people were just speaking maybe over social media and you saw comments, how far, if at all, did those names kind of get into the mix?
That was mentioned amongst not me. It was mentioned to me afterwards. And I was kind of like, now, if we've got no choice and something has to happen, then we'll think about it. But, we've kind of found our own route so far. People have told us and wrote us off and said, that's not going to work. This can't happen. That can't happen. And, there's not many people who was on TV 10 years ago who are still on TV topping bills now. That's how I say it with Sam. He's not the most talented in the world, not the best fighter in the world, but he's still topping bills on TV 10 years down the line. So we're doing it our own way and it seems to be working. We're kind of getting the fights that they're not easy fights, but we're finally getting the fights that we think suit us rather than just take that one or don't box,
Now, I imagine I know the answer to this next question, obviously listening to you speak here, John, but two names which I wanted to put out there, obviously that ever mentioned Ted Cheeseman rematch. Obviously, we don't know what's going on with Ted now. If that would have ever maybe, been something which Sam wants. I know he's always spoken about he'd be open to it because he'd like to right that wrong. But again, as you've said, maybe Ted now doesn't have something which he can bring into the fight, or the Troy Williamson fight, who obviously has just defended his British title.
Couple of things there. I think Sam would kind of overrule the rest of us on Cheeseman because I think he'd really enjoy that rematch. But, seeing Ted at the awards, he's got a couple of good businesses going. And he kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if Ted maybe retired to run his businesses. He seemed content. He seemed happy where he'd gone. He's had a lot of hard fights. But that would be one where Sam would overrule my kind of like, there's got to be something to aim for because that's what he really wants. Williamson, let's get it straight. Sam would fight him, but I'd say, hold on, he's a dangerous kid, and he is a dangerous kid, to fight for something you won 7 years ago. He's got to bring something to the table. Like, to fight someone that dangerous, so either the money's got to be ridiculous, or they've got a title that you really, really want. To fight a kid like that, who's, you know, he would have lots to gain in like kind of stature and like, you know, in fighting someone like Sam. And no disrespect, because he's a good kid who I'm fully convinced will get to wherever he wants to go. But Sam won the British title when he was 21. You know, so we're topping a bill already. We've got good fights. We've got a promoter who's backing him. It's got, you know, the rewards have got to outweigh the risks when you're 28 in a long, hard career. When you're 21 or when you're 20 and you fight Denton Vassell, then you can take them risks because you haven't got a lot more coming. You haven't got no experience. You haven't got no name. So you've got to take them risks. To take that kind of same risky fight now to win a title that you won 7, maybe 8 years ago, it's kind of like, why? Why would you, you know, it's a bit daft. To get where? If he wins, he'll still be exactly the same place as he is now. If he loses, he's back down the domestic ladder. And we've learned those lessons. So, you know, I know Sam's 28, which isn't old, but he's also in the last kind of quarter of his career now. You know, a 10-year career coming up. You don't start planning 5 or 6 years ahead. And I know Sam's not. So we've got to do everything that's smart and that everything that really suits Sam. He's give more than enough not to be treated in the fact that we do what suits you at this stage. Do you know what I mean?
John, away from those guys, get your thoughts on obviously Shakan Peters as well. And what's the latest with Shakan? You know, again, Dan Aziz recently defending that British title. I saw afterwards that Shaq's name was mentioned. Is that a fight which you think could be possible?
Yeah, it's very possible. Shaq's a former British champion. Dan's the current British champion. And there was a stage where I was doing a live, and I actually had Dan on there saying he'd love to fight Dan for the title, fight Shaq for the title. Shaq's with a promoter that works with Dan's promoters. It's just the fine details there and whether it drops into place. You'll remember, Andy, the time when we had all those talented light middles, Steve Roberts, Jamie Moore, Matthew Macklin, and there was only a couple of fights that happened, and there was loads of them. We had about 5 or 6. Richard Williams. There was a group, and there was just loads of them. And I think we made 2 or 3 fights out of a potential 20. It just never seemed to drop into place at the right time. When someone was ready, someone else was having a title shot. When that guy was ready, this guy was at a cut eye, and it just, you know, and they all would have fought each other. So it's one of them. It's got all the potential. It's an absolute a great. It's you know, you got Boazzi fighting Richards, Dan Aziz against Shaq, Yards just fought Lyndon Arthur. It's like, you know, it's kind of like the super middles, you know, 20 years ago when all these good British guys was all bouncing off each other. You know, when you had Ben, Eubank, Collins, Cornelius Carr, Henry Wharton, all those guys. I met Henry Wharton the other day on my cuts course. I was totally in awe. What a nice guy, but also, you know, he was like a real fighter. So just a little thing there, real pleasure for me as a boxing fan. But yeah, so the light heavyweights seem to be doing it. They're all fighting each other. So yeah, of course it would fit in. And do you know what? Them 6 guys could all earn plenty of money just bouncing off each other for 3 years. You know, picking up world titles amongst them and defending, just like the super middles did, you know, all them years ago. But no, so yeah, it's a definite. There's all the ingredients are there, but this is boxing we're talking about. Sometimes all the ingredients don't make a cake, you know what I mean? So let's just see what happens.
John, Dan actually fought Shaq's last opponent in Mr. Cartwright, and he stopped him in that fight. What did you make of Dan's performance against him?
It wasn't his best performance. It was workmanlike. It was good. I know Reece Cartwright's a handful because he come out the traps against Shaq and give Shaq a little bit to think about before Shaq got on top. What I will say is, though, Reece took that fight with 24 hours notice and Shaq gave him a full 8-week camp. So that's kind of made me look at it and go, well, you know, nothing means anything in boxing. But I looked at it and thought, well, that hasn't made me think worse about it. Do you know what I mean? But no, he done the right job. He's a tough guy, Dan. He's got that work ethic that I like in a fighter. He gets on with things. And even when he's not having his best day, he grinds until it works, which is what you've got to do, because nobody has their best day every time. So, yeah, and fair play to Reece, 24 hours notice, jumped in. I had it even on the cards going into the stoppage round, but kind of the writing was on the wall that Reece's gas tank was empty. Other people probably scored it differently. I think the commentary did, but we know that I'm much better than them anyway, do you know what I mean? So, but yeah, no, I had it even on the cards, but you could just see that Dan had more left in the tank. So, but no, it was a solid performance. It wasn't spectacular like his performance against Ophi Burton, because that was spectacular, you know, but it was solid. Was he a little bit lackluster because of the guy who beat him as an amateur had pulled out? He might have been really up for that. You know, who knows? But he done the job, which is all you can ask of a boxer. When you have a pull out or a little bit of upset, you want the boxer to get in there and do a job. And he did that. He did that in good style. Do you know what I mean?
John, away from them, and again, moving on to Casey Benjamin. What is the latest with Casey?
Hopefully, there'll be an announcement again in the next couple of days that he's got his first major title shot, you know, like a 12-round title. Can't say too much because, one, it might not come off, it's boxing, and I'll look like a dope. Or two, the people who are in charge of announcing might get the hump with me and not give me any more title fights. But yeah, hopefully in a couple of days, Casey will have a really good announcement, big fight, good fight, and I think it'll a good fight for him to win, and I think it'll bump him right up there. Casey's got the potential to really do some good stuff. He's since he's been on TV regular, he's gone from strength to strength, and he's just performing every time.
Right, John, we'll leave it there now then. I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure you've got to get back to the gym to see the guys. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you for speaking to me on Boxing Social.
No problem, Andy. Thanks, mate.